I'll give you the greatest story you've ever told. And the price? That's not the kind of sentence you expect to hear over 2 fingers of cheap bourbon and a bowl of stale pretzels, but then again, I hadn't expected my last novel to tank so hard that my agent stopped returning emails with anything but a polite ghost emoji. Life surprises you. Sometimes it's with a new lease on inspiration, sometimes it's with a man in a perfectly pressed charcoal suit who looks like he wandered into the wrong cosmos, not just the wrong bar. Rain hammered the windows like 1,000 deadlines. The neon outside bled red into the puddles on the floorboards, a migraine glow. I had a notebook open to a page I'd been staring at for an hour. Nothing but a title half-scribbled, untitled apology. The bartender, a woman with a tattoo of a swallow breaking out of a cage, had the mercy to pretend I was writing, not hemorrhaging silence. He sat down without asking. Too graceful to squeak the stool. Too dry for a man who just stepped out of a storm. His hair was dark and too neat for midnight, his jaw cut like an apology you almost believe. And those eyes, when the neon hit them, there was a candle burning somewhere deep in the tar. You look, he said, like a man who has misplaced his ending. I didn't misplace it, I said. It filed for a restraining order. One corner of his mouth moved. Not a smile, exactly. More like a footnote to one. I'm Theron. Miles. I kept my tone bored, in case he was one of those networking sharks who pretend to read. This seat taken by a long-term disappointment? Yes. Me. Disappointment is a genre, he said lightly. You've been writing in it for a while. That good, huh? I took a swallow and regretted it immediately. The bourbon tasted like regret's older brother, the one who left home and learned how to smoke. What do you want, Theron? Because if you're here to pitch a podcast, I'm at max capacity for failure. I'm here to offer you work, he said. And the storm outside seemed to hold its breath. Ghostwriting, if you like the term. I have a story. I need it told. Precisely. Beautifully. I laughed, and it came out more tired than amused. People always want precisely and beautifully when they mean cheaply and yesterday. He folded his hands, long fingers knitted like a cathedral roof. I can't offer you money. Wow, you're bad at this. But I can offer you everything money was supposed to buy. The story you've been waiting for since you were 12, and discovered that words make doors. The one that remembers you when the lights go out. Sounds like a cult, I said. Do you also have matching robes and a Slack channel? Again, that almost smile. You'll have to get your own robe. I should have stood. I should have left. Instead, I heard myself ask the question you ask when you're empty enough to echo. What's the catch? He didn't blink. I must have made a face because he went on, patient, like a teacher with a bright but badly behaved student. Not your soul. Not in the vulgar transactional sense. You, the way you listen, the way you frame a heartbeat until it becomes a drum. You as lens and lantern. You. For the duration of the work. You're saying you want my time. I'm saying I want your attention, he said, and somewhere in my chest, something I thought was rusted shifted, interested despite itself. Okay, I said, playing for time. Let's pretend I'm desperate, which to be clear is not pretending. What kind of story is this? The kind that eats, he said softly. And heals. The kind that becomes more true when it's told. I drummed my pen against the notebook. A memoir. A biography, he corrected. Of me. I stared. You're serious. Painfully. Are you famous? Secretly? Are you the guy behind those meditation apps? Did you start a tech company and sell it before lunch? Because if this is an elaborate way to get me to write a redemption arc. I'm not human, he said. I laughed again, because sometimes there's nothing else cool. I'm not solvent. I'm not joking. He leaned in. Up close, he smelled like ozone after lightning and paper on the verge of catching fire. I am a demon, Miles, a patron of stories. I feed on their telling. I keep what they keep. And I haven't been loved by a narrator in a very long time. Okay, I said slowly, because the alternative was calling him crazy. And risk losing the first interesting conversation I'd had in months. Let's say I roll with that. What happens if I say yes? You sign, he said simply, and we begin. He produced a pen and a sheet of paper that looked older than the building. The letters across its surface weren't quite still. They shifted the way dreams do when you try to stare them down, rearranging themselves into clauses that understood me better than I did. The bartender drifted by, glanced at the page, and frowned like she'd tasted something metallic. Legalese? I asked, because humor is the last coat you apply before you jump into cold water. Legal, he said. Less ease. I scanned it. No mention of blood, no flames. Just terms. Time, exclusivity, a promise to listen, to write, to stay until the story was done. He tapped the signature line. What do I get? I said, and hated how small I sounded. Pages, said Theron, and his voice softened not with pity but with recognition. Clean ones. That fill on their own when you admit what you're afraid to say. A book with your name on it that doesn't apologize for existing. A way back to yourself. I looked at my notebook. At the title, untitled, Apology. At the soaked city beyond the window, bruised and gleaming. At my hands, which trembled not from alcohol, but the possibility of being more than a mouth that recycles other people's pain. If this is a prank, I said, it's elaborate. If this is a miracle, he said, it's overdue. I took the pen. It was heavier than it looked, warm as if someone had been holding it for a century. When I pressed the nib to the paper, the ink didn't pool. Smoke curled out of the line, thin and dark, and sank into the page like breath into a body. The letters confirmed themselves around my name, exhaled, and stilled. Every hair on my arms rose. The bar's lights flickered. The swallow on the bartender's arm stretched its wings. Welcome, Theron said, so quietly it might have been in my head. I'll meet you at your place. Finish your drink. I don't live with strangers, I said, even as a strange calm walked into my bones and sat down. And I don't invite them over. I won't need an invitation. He stood, not so much leaving as ceasing to be present. We begin at midnight. How will you? But he was already walking away, and the door opened for him before the bartender touched it, and the rain parted through the neon for a man who did not get wet. I stared at the empty stool. I stared at the paper. The signature gleamed and was gone, settled into the fibers, as permanent as a scar you decide to keep. Friend of yours? The bartender asked. Client, I said, and the word flicked at something in my throat that wanted to laugh and cry at the same time. Watch yourself, she said. Weather's getting weird. It does that, I said, and because I'm an adult, I threw back the rest of the bourbon like courage came in bottles. The walk home was a catalogue of reflections. Puddles held small versions of me that didn't look convinced. The rain tasted like old pennies. When I reached my building, the elevator blinked out of service in a font that managed to be smug, so I took the stairs and made bargains with my hamstrings. I don't remember unlocking the door. I don't remember shrugging off my coat or putting the notebook on the table or the way the light over the sink decided now was a great time to buzz like a dying bee. I don't remember lying down. I do remember waking up at dawn with my cheek stuck to the keyboard, and the taste of ash on my tongue, the storm finally gone, the city rinsed and quiet as a held breath. My laptop hummed, open to a document I didn't remember opening, let alone writing. The first line read, On the night the last king bought his crown with his heartbeat, a boy born without a shadow learned how to steal one. I sat there for a long time, listening to my own heart. It sounded unremarkable. It sounded expensive. The next morning smelled like damp paper and bad decisions. My laptop still glowed on the desk, humming like it had been waiting all night. I scrolled through the document, heart punching a little faster with every sentence I didn't remember writing. It was good, too good. The words had a rhythm I'd never managed sober, let alone half asleep and post-bourbon. When the doorbell rang, I nearly jumped out of my skin. Theron leaned against the frame like a catalog model for mysterious strangers who ruin your lease agreement. Same charcoal suit, not a wrinkle in sight. The only concession to the mortal realm was a faint smell of rain that followed him in. You write quickly, he said, eyes flicking toward the laptop. I didn't write that, I said. Or I did, but I don't remember doing it. Good, he said, as if that settled everything. That means it's working. He didn't elaborate. He rarely did. By noon, we were at my favorite cafe, because apparently, even demons respect the sanctity of caffeine. Theron regarded the menu like it was written in runes only he could decipher. Coffee, he said finally. I tried not to smile. Classic. When it arrived, he stared into the cup as if it had personally wronged him. One sip later, his expression confirmed it. This, he said flatly, is bitter water. Why do you drink this? Because it keeps me alive. He pushed the cup away like it might bite. It tastes like regret steeped in ashes. That's the point, I said. Welcome to the human condition. Something in his face softened, an almost smile faint as a rumor. I've tasted worse things, he said, and for a second I wondered what exactly he meant. Back at my apartment, the air felt heavier, like the stories themselves had followed us home. Theron didn't sit so much as unfold into a chair, his posture perfect, hands clasped loosely like he was about to deliver judgment. Tell me about the king, I said. He looked at me for a long moment, like he was deciding whether I deserved it. Then his voice dropped into something older, thicker, carrying dust from centuries. There was once a king, he began, who ruled a country that feared dying more than it feared living badly. He heard of a man, a trickster, a liar, a demon, who could grant immortality, and the king, thinking himself clever, offered his crown, his gold, his armies. Theron's gaze drifted toward the window, but his voice stayed steady. The demon refused all of it. He wanted only the king's heartbeat. The king agreed. He thought a crown could not rule if its wearer was dead. He was wrong. Because what is? A heartbeat but the rhythm of choosing, the music of fear and wonder? Without it, he was a statue that spoke commands. His people obeyed. But they never loved him again. A pause. Rain began to crawl down the glass outside, slow and deliberate. And the demon? I asked. Theron's jaw tightened. The demon learned that some bargains echo longer than you expect. Something in the room had shifted, like the temperature dropped. Or maybe it was just me holding my breath. That night, I dreamed of the king. He stood in a hall of mirrors, crown crooked, eyes hollow as burned-out lanterns. When he looked at me, his face wasn't his own anymore. It kept changing, young, old, furious, begging. And behind every reflection stood Theron, silent, watching like a man watches a house he once burned down. Tell it right, the king said. His voice rattled like dry leaves. Tell it so I don't vanish. I woke up with the sheets tangled around me, and the taste of iron in my mouth. The next day, Theron showed up again, apparently immune to things like calling ahead. You look, he observed, like you haven't slept. Dreams, I said, pouring coffee into a mug big enough to drown in. Your stories are leaking. They're persistent, he said mildly. Souls often are. I didn't ask what he meant because my phone lit up with the name Julian Harper, my editor. Ex-editor, technically. We hadn't spoken since he told me my last book read like a man yelling into a mailbox for 300 pages. Miles, he said the moment I picked up. Heard a rumor you're working on something new. Rumor travels fast, I said. Talent travels faster, he lied smoothly. I want first rights, exclusive. We can make this big. I glanced at Theron, who raised an eyebrow like he could hear every word. Which, considering him, maybe he could. It's early, I said carefully. I don't even know what it is yet. Julian chuckled. You never do. That's your brand, Miles. Send me pages by Friday. He hung up before I could tell him where to file his Friday. Theron was watching me the way cats watch goldfish. Who was that? Publisher, I said. Smells money, thinks he smells talent. Will he be a problem? He's always a problem. I rubbed my face. But he pays for coffee, so. Theron's gaze flicked toward my laptop. The story comes first. Let him wait. I should have argued. Instead, I opened a blank document, fingers hovering like maybe this time they wouldn't betray me. "Start with the king," Theron said. "Start with his mistake." So I wrote. The king thought immortality meant victory. He didn't know it meant loneliness carved in gold. The words came easier than they should have, like someone whispering them just over my shoulder. By evening, the apartment felt crowded, though it was only us. Crowded with ghosts, with echoes, with the weight of a story that didn't want to stay on paper. Theron stood by the window, city lights painting his face in fragments. "There are more tales," he said softly. "Kings, thieves, lovers, all the bargains people make when they want too much." "And you?" I asked before I could stop myself. "What did you want?" For the first time his composure cracked, barely, a hairline fracture across marble. "Once," he said, "I wanted to be remembered." Outside, thunder rolled like someone rearranging furniture in the sky. And inside, for reasons I didn't want to name yet, I wanted to keep writing until there were no blank pages left in either of us. Theron's house didn't look like it belonged to anyone who ever laughed. It rose out of the edge of the city where the streetlights thinned, all gray, stone and black windows, a place with too many corners for the moon to find. The gate creaked open without anyone touching it, and I told myself that was just wind. Inside, the air smelled like paper left near a fireplace too long. Warm, brittle, ready to catch. Books lined the walls, some spines cracked, some titles in languages that looked like sleep-deprived calligraphy. The whole place felt like it had been waiting centuries for someone to tell it what century it was now. Theron watched me take it in. "Make yourself at home." "Sure," I said. "All I need is a coffin and a Wi-Fi password." One corner of his mouth twitched. "Coffee's in the kitchen. Coffins are upstairs." I sat at a massive oak table, laptop open, trying not to notice the way the house breathed when it thought I wasn't looking. Theron paced like someone replaying old conversations in his head. "Your publisher called me," he said finally. "Julian." I groaned. What did he want? "The manuscript." I blinked. "You didn't?" "No." Theron's voice cut sharp. "He won't get it. Not unless you give it to him." "That's the point," I said. "He pays for it." "And what price?" Theron asked softly. "Will you pay if it leaves your hands too soon?" Something in his tone made me close the laptop like it might catch fire. Later, I wandered through the house while Theron worked in another room. It felt less like trespassing than like the place wanted to show me things. Portraits stared from the walls, their eyes too vivid for paint. A woman with a crown of winter branches. A boy holding a book whose pages fluttered though no wind moved. I stopped at a painting of a king. The king, I realized. The one who gave up his heartbeat. His crown looked heavy enough to drown him. "You keep souvenirs?" I asked when Theron appeared behind me. "Memorials," he said. "Every story leaves one." Something in his expression made my skin prickle. "They were real. They are real," he said. "Somewhere. Someone. Stories don't end just because you close the book." I thought about the king in my dream, how his eyes had followed me like he knew I carried his echo. Does he hate you?" Theron's gaze stayed on the painting. He bargained. I kept the bargain. "Hate is for those who think life is unfair. And it isn't. It's meticulous," he said. The doorbell, or maybe the house itself, announced a visitor with a low chime that felt in my bones. Theron stiffened. "Stay here," he said. And for once, I didn't argue. Voices floated from the front hall. Two men, one cool and even, one sharp as glass underfoot. "You're hard to find these days," said the stranger. "Not hard enough, apparently," Theron replied. I edged closer until I could see them reflected in a tall mirror angled toward the hall. The stranger leaned in the doorway like he owned the concept of doorways. Pale hair, dark coat, a smile like a paper cut. "Hello, Theron," he said. "You've been busy." His eyes slid toward the house beyond, toward me, though he couldn't see me. I hoped. "Found yourself another storyteller?" "Leave," Theron said. The man tisked softly. "What was the last one's name? Clara?" "No. Caroline, lovely voice," cried when she wrote the endings. "You do have a type?" Theron moved closer, slow, deliberate. Raven. Ah. So this was the X. You can't keep collecting them, Raven said. Little flames to warm your cold halls. Sooner or later they burn out. His smile sharpened. Or they burn you. Theron's hand twitched like he wanted to summon lightning just to make a point. Take your threats, he said, voice low, and go. Raven stepped inside anyway, gaze skimming the shelves, the portraits, the air like he could read the ghosts. Does he know what you are? I went cold. He knows enough, Theron said. Does he? Raven's grin widened. Or does he just like the way you talk in riddles until he thinks the chains feel like bracelets? Theron moved faster than I expected. 1 second Raven was smirking. The next he was pinned against the doorframe. Theron, his hand at his throat, shadows coiling up like they wanted in on the fight. You don't get to touch this one, Theron said, and there was something in his voice that made the walls lean closer. Raven laughed, breathless but pleased. Oh, this is different. You like him? The shadows tightened. Careful, Raven murmured. Wouldn't want to show him the monster before the final act. Theron shoved him back into the night. The door slammed. The house exhaled. I stepped into the hall because pretending I hadn't heard all that was pointless. So, I said carefully, ex-boyfriend? Theron's expression shuddered like a window before a storm. Something like that. Seems friendly. He's not. I hesitated. What did he mean? About chains. Theron looked at me then, really looked, like he was weighing how much truth I could carry before it snapped my spine. Stories bind, he said finally. Every bargain leaves a thread. Some of us just have more threads than others. And me? I asked before I could stop myself. Do I get out when the book is done? Or do I end up on a wall too? Something flickered across his face, not guilt exactly, something older. You get to choose, he said. If you want to. That night we drove back toward the city, the road slick with rain, street lights smearing gold across the windshield. Theron kept one hand on the wheel, the other loose on the gearshift, and I kept catching myself watching the veins on his wrist like they spelled something. Raven was wrong, I said finally. About monsters. Theron's mouth twitched, almost a smile, but not quite. Give it time. The city rose ahead, bright and loud, pretending it didn't have teeth. I should have been scared. Instead, all I felt was the pull of someone who kept handing me pieces of himself, like he didn't know he was doing it. And maybe like I didn't know what to do with them. It started with David showing up at my apartment like he always did, uninvited, carrying takeout, radiating the kind of concern that smelled faintly of judgment. Miles, he said, dropping cartons of noodles on my table. We need to talk. That's never good, I muttered, closing my laptop halfway. Theron had left earlier saying he had business. The kind that carried capital letters even when you didn't write them down. The apartment felt bigger without him. Colder too, though I didn't admit that to myself. David looked tired. He was the kind of friend who worried like it was cardio. Brown hair stuck up from the rain, glasses sliding down his nose. He shoved one carton toward me like food might soften whatever speech he had loaded. I looked into him, he said. I blinked. Into who? Theron. My stomach tightened. Why? Because, David said, lowering his voice like the walls might be listening. People don't just appear out of nowhere with no records, no ID, no past you can trace, offering writers contracts that don't mention money. That's not eccentric, Miles. That's dangerous. I tried to laugh. It came out thin. What? You think he's a mobster? David didn't smile. He's a demon, Miles. The laugh died completely. I'm serious. He leaned in, eyes bright with the kind of sincerity that made you want to punch it just to stop it shining at you like that. I found things. Old things. Stories that go back centuries. Theron isn't a name, it's a title. He collects people like you, writers, poets, dreamers. They make him immortal in stories. And when they're done, stop, I said sharply. David froze. He's not. I shook my head. You don't know him. I know enough, David snapped. Enough to see you signing your life away for some myth with good hair. The anger surprised me. You think I can't handle my own choices? I think you're lonely, he shot back, and he knows it. That one landed. I turned away, jaw tight, staring at the rain crawling down the window like it was looking for a way in. David sighed, rubbing his face. Look, I'm trying to help. Just give me something. Let me talk to someone, a lawyer, your editor. Julian. I snorted. Yeah. Because he always has my best interests at heart. But David was already pulling my half-finished pages toward him, scanning like a man searching for proof. Don't, I said sharply. Miles, please. If I can show someone, maybe we can break this thing before it's too late. I should have stopped him. Instead, I let him leave with the pages, because some part of me wanted him to be wrong on paper, not just in theory. The call came 2 hours later. Miles, Julian purred, voice thick with triumph. This is brilliant. Dark, tragic, mythic. God, the angle alone will sell it. Where did you even find this guy? My blood went cold. Julian. What pages? Your friend dropped them off. Said you needed representation. David, I muttered, stomach sinking. Listen, kid, Julian went on. I can leak a teaser by Monday. Create some buzz before it's finished. People love mystery. And demons? That's marketing gold. No, I said. Absolutely not. You don't touch this until I... The line clicked dead. I stared at the phone like it had personally betrayed me, which, to be fair, it had. Theron arrived just as I was shoving on my coat. Where? He asked mildly. Are you going with that expression? Julian has the pages, I snapped. Something in his face flickered, storm cloud dark. How? David, I almost spat the name. He thinks he's saving me. Theron didn't swear, but the air around him did. We drove through rain that made the city blur at the edges. Neither of us talked. Julian's office glowed like ambition bottled in glass. He smiled too wide when we walked in, holding my pages like a man who'd discovered fire. Miles, relax, he said. I know a gold mine when I see one. This story, this Theron, we make him the next urban legend. Netflix will eat it up. Give them back, I said. Come on. Mystery sells. A reclusive writer, a cursed benefactor. The lights flickered. Julian stopped. Theron stepped forward, and for a heartbeat the air pressed heavy, like the whole building leaned away from him. Return them, Theron said softly. Julian laughed nervously. Look, pal. I don't know what your deal is. The stack of papers flew off his desk as if struck by wind from nowhere, scattering across the floor like panicked birds. Julian stumbled back. Okay, fine. Take them. Jesus. Theron bent, gathering pages with deliberate calm, though his jaw was tight enough to crack stone. We didn't speak until we were back outside, city lights smeared across wet pavement. You should have told me, I said finally. His hands stilled on the pages. Told you what? That you're... this... I gestured helplessly, meaning the storm, the shadows, the way Julian had looked ready to renounce capitalism 5 seconds in. You didn't ask, Theron said. I didn't think I had to. My voice rose. God, Theron, do you have any idea what it's like writing a story and finding out halfway through it's not fiction anymore? He looked at me then. Really looked. And the anger in his eyes wasn't at me. You think I wanted this? He said quietly. That I don't know what it costs? Every word you write burns, Miles. Every story takes something. From you, from me. Then why drag me into it? I demanded. Because, he said, and his voice cracked sharp as breaking glass. I thought you could carry it. We stared at each other under a streetlight buzzing like it couldn't stand the tension either. Rain slicked his hair back, ran down his face like the night couldn't tell where to stop. I wanted to yell. I wanted to leave. I wanted to stay because something in his eyes looked like the kind of loneliness you don't fix with company, only with understanding. But I didn't know how to give him that right now. So I turned and walked away, pages clutched tight, the distance between us suddenly heavier than the whole rain-drowned city. The storm followed us back to Theron's house like it had been waiting for us to open the door. He didn't speak when we entered, just hung up his coat with the kind of precision that made you think emotions were things he stored in boxes, labeled but never opened. I stood dripping in the foyer, pages clutched under my arm, unsure if I was supposed to apologize or set the place on fire out of sheer frustration. "Come," he said finally. His voice was quieter than usual, as if the storm outside had taken some of its weight. "There's something you need to see." He led me through the house, deeper than I'd been before, into a hall, lined with tall doors that looked older than the country outside. At the end waited one carved with strange symbols that didn't want to stay still when you looked at them. It opened onto a library that could have housed several small nations. Books towered up into shadow, spiral staircases coiled toward balconies. Candles burned in iron cages that swayed though there was no wind. "This," Theron said, "is where it began." I turned slowly, staring at rows of spines whose titles shifted if I tried to read them too long. What began? "Me," he said simply. He moved toward a central table where an open book waited, its pages yellowed, handwriting dark and looping. He touched it like it might bite. "I was a man once," he said. "Not a good one, not a wise one. Just a man who wrote things no one read." I blinked. Somehow the idea of Theron as ordinary was harder to believe than the idea of him as a demon. "There was a woman," he continued, eyes fixed on the page. "She believed in me. More than she should have. I thought if I could write one story that lasted, one thing that mattered, she'd be proud she'd chosen me." His hand tightened on the edge of the book. "When the demon came, I thought I was bargaining for greatness. I gave him my love, my heartbeat, my name, all for words that wouldn't rot with the paper they were written on." He looked up at me then, and I could see it, the echo of someone who had been human once, standing where I stood, wanting too much. "Did you get it?" I asked softly. Theron's mouth twisted. "I got eternity." It wasn't the same thing. I moved closer to the table. The open book held a single line written over and over, in darker and darker ink until the page nearly tore. "She will remember me." "Did she?" I asked. "For a while," he said. "Then she died. Mortals do." The words landed heavy in the air between us. I turned slowly, looking at the endless shelves. "All these, they're contracts?" He nodded. "Every story told under my name. Every soul that paid for it." My throat tightened. "Including mine." "Yes." The word came like stone dropping into water. I gripped the back of a chair because the room felt like it was tilting. "So that's it. When I finish the book, I'm gone?" Theron closed the ledger. "It was never supposed to be you." "Meaning what?" "Meaning I've taken hundreds of names," he said. "Greedy men, cruel men, desperate men. They knew the price and paid it. You were supposed to write it, not be it." Something cracked in his voice, a hairline fracture across the calm he wore like armor. "I thought I could control it," he said, "that I could keep you out of its reach. But contracts have teeth, Miles. They bite whether you want them to or not." I stared at him, at the man, demon, whatever he was, standing there with his shoulders drawn tight like the only thing holding him up was anger at himself. "You should have told me," I said. "I know. Why didn't you?" He looked at me then, and for the first time since I'd met him, Theron didn't seem untouchable. "Because," he said, and the word felt pulled from somewhere deep, "I didn't want to watch you walk away." The library was silent except for rain against the high windows. I didn't move when he came around the table, stopping just close enough that I could see the lines of exhaustion around his eyes. "I have lived too long," he said quietly. "Too many stories. Too many endings. I thought I wanted permanence. But you—" He broke off, shook his head. "You make me want things that end. And that makes me weak." "Want things?" My voice barely worked. "Time," he said. "Laughter. Coffee that tastes like more than ashes." His gaze found mine. "You." It wasn't a confession shouted to the rafters. It was worse. It was small, honest, and something in me that had been knotted since the night we met pulled tighter instead of loosening. "There has to be a way out," I said. Some loophole. If there is, Theron murmured. I haven't found it in 300 years. The number settled in my chest like a stone. 300 years of this house, these shelves, this loneliness stitched between bargains. I should have run. Instead, I stepped closer. Close enough to see the candlelight catch in his hair, close enough to feel the heat of him though the air was cold. His hand twitched like he wanted to reach for me and didn't trust himself to. Be careful, Miles, he said softly. If I want too much, it will ruin us both. The worst part was, I believed him. We left the library hours later. Or, maybe, minutes. Time didn't behave in that room. The storm had stopped, but the air outside still smelled like lightning waiting for permission. Theron locked the door behind us. I didn't ask why. Because I'd seen what was written on those shelves. And because part of me already knew the story wasn't going to end the way either of us wanted. The theater looked like it had been abandoned mid-applause. Rows of velvet seats slumped under dust. The chandelier above hanging like a broken crown. Its crystals coughing up what little moonlight pushed through the cracked roof. The air smelled of mildew and ghosts who'd gotten bored of haunting. This was where Raven had chosen to meet. Of course it was. Theron walked beside me, coat snapping in the wind through the shattered doors. His face gave nothing away, but I could feel the tension coming off him like heat from a fire you couldn't see yet. Stay behind me, he said. Not a chance, I muttered, clutching the manuscript against my chest like it was a shield and not the reason we were here at all. They were waiting on the stage. Raven lounged across the edge like the world owed him a throne, pale hair catching what light there was, smile sharp as ever. Julian stood beside him, jittery with triumph, eyes darting everywhere like he couldn't believe his luck had finally moved in. The manuscript, my manuscript, sat on a music stand between them like a holy relic. Theron, Raven drawled, voice echoing through the hollow space. You brought the author. How considerate. Give it back, Theron said. Raven smirked. Oh, I think not. This story belongs to the world now. Don't you agree, Julian? Julian licked his lips. People will pay for this. A real demon, real souls, God the rights alone. Shut up, Theron snapped, and Julian shut. Raven slid off the stage with the kind of grace that made you want to punch him. You've gotten soft, he said to Theron. 3 centuries, and you're still pretending these little mortals matter. His eyes flicked toward me. Especially this one. I stepped forward before Theron could stop me. You want a deal? I said, voice shaking but loud enough to carry. Take me, let him go. Theron's head whipped toward me. Miles. No, I said. My throat felt raw. You wanted a story? Here it is. I finished the book, you get my soul, whatever. Just leave him alone. Raven's smile widened, like he'd been hoping for this all along. Hear that, Theron? He volunteers. How noble. Stop, Theron said. But there was something in his voice, fear sharp and thin, that made my chest ache. Raven reached for the manuscript. Done. It never touched his hand. Shadows snapped up from the floor like chains, wrapping the pages, holding them mid-air. The whole theater groaned, as if the building itself didn't like what was happening. Theron moved to the center of the stage, every line of him drawn tight. No, he said. Raven laughed. You can't change the terms now. A contract is a contract. I wrote it, Theron said, voice low, dangerous. I can end it. Raven tilted his head. At the cost of what, I wonder? Theron didn't answer. And that was when I realized. His power, the thing that made storms listen and buildings hold their breath, was bound to the contracts, to the stories, to this. If he tore it apart, he wasn't just freeing me. He was breaking himself. Don't, I whispered. Theron glanced at me. And for the first time since I'd met him, there was nothing unreadable in his eyes. Only regret. And something worse, something like relief. You wanted choice, he said softly. This is mine. The shadows convulsed, ripping the manuscript in half with a sound like thunder through paper. Light, black and blinding, poured out, whipping through the theater, rattling the seats, shattering what glass the place had left. Raven staggered back, fury twisting his perfect smile. You idiot. You'll lose everything. Theron's voice cracked across the chaos. Maybe I was meant to. The last of the pages burned into ash that wasn't ash, vanishing before it hit the floor. The silence after was worse than the noise. Raven stood there a moment, trembling with rage that didn't fit his elegant edges. Then the shadows that had come with him, the ones I hadn't even noticed until they began peeling off the walls, rose up all at once and swallowed him whole. He didn't even scream. When they cleared, he was gone. Julian scrambled to his feet, face pale, ambition leaking out of him like air from a slashed tire. What was that? Where's Raven? Where's the story? We had a deal. Theron turned toward him slowly. Whatever had been in his eyes before, it wasn't there now. Nothing was. Julian backed away, hands up. Forget it, keep it, all of it. I'm done. He bolted through the side door, footsteps hammering down the alley until the night swallowed him too. The theater felt smaller suddenly. Quieter. Theron swayed like someone had cut invisible strings. The air around him, once thick with power, felt empty now, like a stage after the actors have gone home. I caught him before he fell, which was ridiculous because he was still taller, heavier, steadier than I'd ever be. But he leaned against me anyway, breath ragged. You shouldn't have done that, I said. My voice broke halfway through. I wanted you free, he murmured. At the cost of you? His mouth curved like he meant to smile but forgot how halfway. You were the first thing in 3 centuries that felt like mine, not my bargain, not my curse, just mine. Somewhere above us, wind moved through the shattered rafters, scattering dust across the stage like confetti at the world's slowest parade. I held him there, surrounded by torn velvet and broken light, while the last scraps of the contract's magic bled out into nothing. The air smelled different now. Like endings, but also like beginnings if you breathe deep enough. Theron pulled back finally, unsteady but standing. Whatever power had lived in him was quieter now, banked low. But his eyes, God, his eyes were clear for the first time since I'd met him. No more contracts, he said. No more demons? I asked carefully. A pause. Then, no more chains. We stood there in the wreckage, both of us waiting for the fear to come, for the regret to bite. It didn't. All I felt was the night opening wider, like maybe we had hours again. Days even. Time he hadn't had before, and I'd taken for granted. Time neither of us had any idea how to spend, but wanted to anyway. The first copies arrived on a Tuesday. A neat brown box on my doorstep, smelling of cardboard and ink and everything my 20-year-old self used to dream about when I stayed up too late imagining book tours and Pulitzer speeches. I cut it open with a kitchen knife and pulled out the top one. Stories for the Living. Not the title Theron and I had started with. Not the book we thought we were writing in that storm of bargains and ghosts. Those pages had burned with the contract. What rose from the ashes was something else. Stories about hope, about the strange tenderness of being alive when you know it doesn't last. I flipped through, half afraid the words would fade now that they were real. They didn't. They sat on the page calmly, like they belonged there, like they'd been waiting for this all along. The front door creaked. Theron leaned against the frame, watching me with that unreadable expression he'd perfected. No storms trailed behind him now. No shadows curled at his heels. He looked lighter. Not human, not exactly, but free in a way that made my chest tighten. Well, he said. It's real, I told him. A faint smile tugged at his mouth. So are you. We took the book to the cafe where everything had started. The same. Chipped tables, the same mural of a sun that looked mildly hungover. David met us there, apparently deciding his role as accidental betrayer turned unintentional matchmaker required one last cameo. He picked up the book, flipping through the pages with the caution of someone checking for hexes. No curses, I said dryly. Just stories. Yeah, but your stories, he muttered. Hard to tell which is worse. Theron arched an eyebrow. You doubted the outcome? David gave him a look. You turned a theater into ground zero for a magic apocalypse. Forgive me if I didn't expect a happy ending. Theron's almost smile widened. And yet, David snorted, muttered something about needing stronger coffee, and left before we could turn him into a dedication page. We stayed. Theron stared suspiciously at the cup in front of him like it might bite. "This again," he said. "It's coffee," I reminded him. "People drink it." "They shouldn't," he said flatly, taking the smallest possible sip. His face went through all 5 stages of grief. "It's still bitter water. A crime in liquid form. It's civilization in liquid form," I countered. "It's what happens," he said, "when despair gives up on being subtle." I laughed so loudly the barista glared at me. When we left the cafe, the sky was the color of new beginnings, the pale kind. The ones that don't shout about miracles but still manage to feel like one. Theron walked beside me, hands in his pockets like he hadn't spent 3 centuries throwing lightning bolts at people who annoyed him. "So," I said carefully, "what now?" He glanced at me. "Now you write what comes next." "You think there is a next?" His smile was small but real. "You burned the contract, Miles. Time belongs to you again. Use it." I looked at him. At the man who wasn't a demon anymore, but wasn't just a man either. At the one who had given up power for pages, eternity for something as reckless and ordinary as us. "Maybe I don't want to write it alone," I said. His eyes softened. "Then don't." Back at my apartment, we stacked the books in uneven towers that made the place smell like libraries and dust jackets. Theron picked one up, thumbing through until he found the page where I'd slipped in something I hadn't told him about, a story. Near the end, short and quiet, about a man who thought he was made of shadows until someone taught him how to stand in the sun. He read it twice before closing the book. "You should write the sequel," I said lightly. "I don't write," he said. "You dictate dramatically." "Same thing." He gave me a look that had probably terrified kings once. "If I write it, the coffee scene dies first." "That's censorship," I told him. "And tyranny." "Then so be it." We argued about it all evening, mock-serious voices echoing off the walls, until the apartment felt warmer than it had in years. At some point we ended up on the couch, the manuscript towers leaning around us like awkward spectators. Theron rested his head back, eyes half closed. "I keep waiting for the part where it all disappears," he admitted softly. "It won't," I said. "How can you be sure?" "Because you burned the ending," I told him. "Now we get to make one up." For a long moment he didn't answer. Then he reached over, lacing his fingers through mine with a kind of hesitation that made it feel like the bravest thing either of us had done. When dawn finally slipped through the blinds, the apartment looked different. Maybe it was just the light catching on the stacks of books. Maybe it was the fact that for the first time since this started, the day didn't feel borrowed. Theron was watching the sunrise like someone who hadn't seen many. "You know," he said, "I used to think stories were the only way to live forever. And now?" He looked at me. "Now I think forever's overrated." I smiled into my coffee. He made a face at the cup like it had personally offended him. "We're keeping it in the sequel," I said. "Over my dead body." Bit dramatic, considering we didn't solve anything that morning. Not the future, not the sequel, not whether coffee was poison or proof of civilization. But there was time now. Time for new stories, ones we hadn't bargained for or promised to anyone but ourselves. The first book was done. The next one hadn't been written yet. We had mornings for that now. And maybe even forever, if we wanted it.